The backyard in which I grew up is a space with varying degrees of plant life. There are the well-kept gardens that my mom tends to. They're filled with all sorts of flowers and bushes and perennial plants. There are large oak trees that have stood for many years and annually shower the yard with acorns, which my father loves to pick up in the fall. There are sections that are filled with green, but the green is mostly weeds. There's the spot behind the shed that has no grass or plants of any kind, likely because that's where we trained the family dog to go when she needed to. And you can find a large patch of dirt beaten down by feet walking back and forth from the house to the shed. Behind the castle that my dad built for us as kids is a compost pile filled with decaying leaves and other dirt. On that single plot of land, there is a vast array of plant life because beneath the surface, the soil is vastly different. Some parts are better kept than others. Some parts receive movement and mulch each year. Some were fertilized with dog urine. Others don't receive as much attention, allowing for the weeds to take root and spring up. In this parable from Jesus today, we have one active character, the sower. The sower scatters seeds in hope that they will take root in the soil and grow. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures, God is depicted as a sower. And here in Matthew, Jesus takes on this same character, sowing, as he calls it, quote, the word of the kingdom, from verse 18. And what Jesus means here is a state of being where we trust God and follow in the loving and compassionate footsteps of Christ. If the seeds that lead to this state of being fall on soil where they won't take, though, that state of being cannot possibly come to be. This metaphor naturally leads us to the understanding that humanity is the soil in which Jesus is attempting to plant the word. Humans are much like the soil in which the garden has potential to grow. Some have been treated with care, but others have been neglected. And the environment around us shapes us in ways that we may not even understand and can either set us up for growth or poison the soil of our soul. We all walk different paths and experience life in our own unique ways, and our souls bear all the things that life throws our way. These experiences and the pain that can come with them can very easily make our spiritual soil less able to produce growth. And Jesus attends to this difference in human experience in the first verses of his parable through the metaphor of the soil. His first offering. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. And this path, where so many had passed over, thousands of feet, hooves, wheels have perhaps passed over this path, beating it down, hardening it into its present condition. And the soil on the path is so hard that the seeds won't even sink. They sit at the surface for birds to come and pick at. And there's little chance for them to sink in and grow. So too, there is little chance for the word to take root in people who have been stepped on and beaten down in their own lives. If they are bearing the pain from being beaten down by the world around them, a word of love and compassion might bounce off them in the way that the seeds bounce off the beaten path. A message of love can only take root when the soil in which it is being planted has known love and care. And Jesus continues, saying other seeds fell on the rocky ground where they did not have much soil. And they sprang up quickly since there was no depth of soil. Rocky soil inhibits roots from sinking deep into the soil around it. And when roots can't sink deep, they cannot be nourished by the soil that they are found in. And the result is a plant that springs up quickly but won't grow to its full potential and would wither and die in the slightest inclement weather because its roots lacked depth. Similarly, there are those with rocks in their own spiritual soil that inhibit the roots of love and compassion to sink deeply. Things like trauma, prejudice, hatred, and phobias are the rocks that can keep the roots of Jesus' way from sinking deeply within us. Not tending to rocky spiritual soil inhibits our spirituality from being deep and steadfast in a way that can survive the rocky ground that life can send our way. It can keep us from being steadfast when our faith is challenged. And the next metaphor that Jesus offers is that he says, other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Invasive plants that are already growing serve as competitors for sunlight, for nutrients in the soil, and they give little room for seeds to take root and grow, and they vie for all of the resources that a plant would need to grow and to thrive in a garden. Likewise, our busy lives make for overcrowded spiritual soil. An overcrowded garden that isn't weeded properly will lead to invasive plants taking over, and especially taking over those that need more intentional love and care and nurturing. Likewise, the more demanding things in life can overshadow and overtake our spiritual life, causing it to fall into decay in the unkept, chaotic brush sprouting from our spiritual soil. Now, Jesus makes mention of the soil, the seeds, and the sower, but fails to mention how good soil comes to be. In some cases, it can come naturally. As leaves fall or plants die, their decomposition reinvigorates the soil around them, providing new nutrients for the growth of new plant life. But that takes time. To turn the soil over and refresh it more quickly so that consistent growth can happen requires someone to do that work. And while Jesus never mentions a gardener, we, the readers of this text, ultimately assume both the role of the soil and the one meant to tend to that soil. It will take work on our part to tend to our own spiritual soil. We will have to do the heavy spiritual lifting to loosen the packed down parts of our spirit, of our soul that have been beaten down. The rocks that may be present in our soil, whether or not we are to blame for their presence, are our responsibility to remove and to make way in our gardens for the seeds of love. We must prune away other growth that would compete for the same nutrients and light needed for God's seeds to grow in the soil of our souls. But friends, we don't have to do this alone. And spiritual communities like churches exist for the very purpose of being surrounded by others, doing this spiritual work so that we might share in this same journey. Through faith sharing, we learn new gardening tricks that we can use on our own spiritual soil. And through spiritual communities, we come together to even help tend to the soil of others in our community who may need a little bit more help than we do. When we do this deep and many times difficult spiritual work, we make room for new growth within us and around us. The same is true for the wider faith community. Before we join together, our spiritual soil mixes together to form one larger garden. And before new seeds can take root, we must do the preparatory work of tending to the spiritual soil of our wider faith community. Honest self-reflection is at the heart of this practice. It will take the removal of rocks, the loosening of firmly packed soil, and the pruning of other plants. And tending to a garden is hard, it's messy, it's sweaty, and it's tiring. But the beauty that can come from that hard work and dedication is something that is well worth the heavy lifting, well worth the sweat, and well worth the time. It enables us to make way for new life, new love, and new beginnings.